Alright guys, welcome to my channel today. Today I'm going to look at three bikes. All three bikes I have an interest in buying. One of them, not all three. So we're going to look at the three bikes. The first one we're going to start with here is the wired bike. So I'm looking at these bikes because they have bigger than a 750 watt motor in them. I'm looking for a bike that I can try to maintain about 30 miles an hour with, give or take 28, 30 mile an hour on an average I'm looking for. So these bikes have the ability to do this, I believe, in my area. So this is why I'm interested in them. I'm looking to be able to take my bike to work, which is 22 miles there, 22 miles back. I want to do it in about 45 to 50 minutes. That's what it takes me in my car. And so we'll start with this wired bike here. This is a very appealing bike to me to look at. There's very little I would do with this bike to change it. Like I said, the bike is, to me, is super appealing. They do make this in a step through. I do not want a step through bike. I don't like these semi-integrated batteries in the tube on a step through because I believe the frame is too weak. This tube on the top is going to reinforce this. The strongest frame is these diamond shaped frames. Okay, you're not going to see a professional mountain biker on a step through, let's put it that way, because they're too weak. And you can put all the bracing in here you want. This three-sided tube is in what you end up with just isn't that strong. I mean, they would have to increase the thickness of this aluminum to get that thing much stronger, and they're not. They're relatively thin tubes. So this is very important to make this bike strong, especially on a bike that can go 30 miles an hour. The other thing with this bike is if you got the step through, the same money, and you don't end up with the rear suspension on it. And I want the rear suspension. If I'm going to pay this much for a bike, they're not going to discount it any. I want the suspension on it. But like I said, this one here would be the one I would choose. I would either get the blue or this color. Both these colors appeal to me. You get the fenders in the rack with the bike, so this is what you get on the bike to start with. So this bike here is also pre-order. They're saying orders placed will come in mid-February. They've been running a little behind on them, at least the last time. So, it's not readily available. The other two bikes we're going to look at are readily available. So, this has a 1500 watt motor on it, and it peaks out at 2200 watts. It also has 138 newton meters of torque, which is very torquey. So this bike would more than do what I wanted to do. It comes with a 60 volt 20 amp hour battery. They're saying it gets 80 miles. In my area, I figure this bike honestly would probably get between 30 and 35, and probably because of how big the motor is, I'm thinking more in the 30ish range. Especially when you're going to run this thing. To run it at the speed that I want to run it, I'm going to be in probably 3 or 4, and it's a 5-pass bike. The bike comes in class 2, and it can go to class 3, so you can override it in the software. We've all done that, I'm sure. So this goes into the battery. Down here they're saying 60 miles. Let's see, they're saying that at pass 1. So you're not going to be riding this bike in pass 1. If you're going to ride this bike in pass 1, why would you buy this bike? So here's your 1500 watt motor, continuous, but then the 2200 watt is the peak on that motor. So that's when the battery's fully charged. And then it goes down from there. Got a color display on this. This thing is a Candace, not a torque sensor bike. Watched a lot of reviews on this bike, and you can really fine tune the Candace sensor on this bike, almost making it feel like a torque sensor. So they say. I'd love to try one to find out, but Steel reinforced gears. So I don't know a lot about the inside of a hub motor, but from what they're saying, I guess a lot of them are plastic only. These have steel on the outside, and on the inside it's plastic, so they're supposed to last longer. This is a pretty torquey bike, so you probably want those steel gears, and that's probably why they added it to it, to be perfectly honest. It has Samsung cells, very good battery. Um, this bike I would be putting a second battery on, probably on the rack. Uh, Again, the controller is a 40 amp hour controller. That's a that's a beefy controller, guys. That's why this bike is one of the faster ones out there. Twist throttle on this, 5 levels of pedal assistance, and the standover height on this bike is, what is the standover? 29.7. We'll round it up to 30 inches. So 30 inches to stand over this bike. I can fit on this bike nicely. So the brakes are Techno. Awesome that they're Techno as far as I'm concerned. Hydraulic, obviously. The 180 rotors, ceramic pads. So it's got an air shock on the bike, which is that. Actually, there's a picture of it right here. This is an adjustable air shock, so you can adjust how much this thing's going to bounce up and down. So that's really good too. It's not like a coil shock where it's not really adjustable. 7 speeds on it, which is normal. Chainring, 56 tooth. So it's 56. This 1134 is what I would put on it, so I wouldn't have to change that. Like I said, there's not a lot I change on this bike. Kedna or Chow Yang. The one downfall of this bike that I see, let's go over the bike first. So again, the 138 newton meters of torque, which is super good here. So they're saying speed 33 to 35 in unlocked mode. So this bike, like I said, it's a quick bike. The other bikes we're going to look at will get to the 30-mile range, but that 35, and some people report, even more, but 35, I say, is probably realistic. Weighs 76 pounds with the battery removed. So, it's 88 pounds with the battery. So, we'll call it almost 90-pound bike. So, it's a pretty heavy bike, guys. Cargo rack is only good for 50 pounds. And, yeah, I was going to say it looks pretty beefy, but, yeah, it does look pretty beefy. But 50 pounds, whatever. All I put on it is a pack with a battery in it. So, I'm good with that. Because there's no room for a second battery anywhere in here, obviously. So you'd have to put a second battery up here, and I would probably just put it in the bag. I'd put a bag on it. The only problem with that is swinging a leg over it. Integrated front right light, rear brakes. Doesn't say anything about a brake light, so I don't think it has a brake light. But, at least it has an integrated light. So one of the bikes we're going to look at doesn't. Like I said, I wouldn't change anything up here. I'd probably roll these back a little bit more, and hopefully it would be enough for me. If not, I would just change it to a different stem on this thing to drop it back up that little bit there. But I like the look of the bike. What I don't like is these fenders. I would like this fender to come down into here somewhere to protect you from water coming out. This tire is going to rotate like this, and it's going to throw water right at your feet. So you're going to have wet feet if you're riding in it. Even if it's not raining out, if it's a wet road, you're going to have wet feet. So that is not a great design to me. They do that because this bike just looks awesome with the shorter fenders on it. And I'm sure that's why they're doing it. The rear fender only goes to here. Leaves this whole area here unprotected. Then this tire rotates like this, so the water's going to come up here, and it's going to start to shoot out here when it comes around the tire. So it's going to be shooting out right here, which is right where your feet is, So I don't understand. I do get the idea that this thing here is going to go up and down like this, okay, because it has a suspension here. So this area would be moving like this, but I don't know why they couldn't have this fender here and maybe a secondary one that overlaps this fender a little bit that's pivoting off the bottom. I would probably try to do something with that. by using a different fender. I would leave this. This thing here, I'd probably try to get another fender off another bike or something that was a little bit longer. I mean, 26-inch bike, you can change out the fenders on different bikes. So I would definitely do that. So what I would do to this bike is fenders would be changed. Possibly the crank, I'd have to ride it for a while. The seat would get changed and second battery on it. And I'm thinking I'd be pretty happy with this bike. So I would have a minimal investment into this bike on top of buying it. So $1,900 looks like a pretty good price for this bike for what you're getting for $1,900. Here's the catch though, guys. They charge you for shipping. So you got to add about $250 on top of that. $2,250 plus they also charge you a $75 fee for insurance. You can waive it, but if you waive the insurance, let's hit the order here and see what happens. They have this insurance here, and this insurance is $75 more, and it says it protects you from damage. So if this thing gets damaged in shipping or gets stolen or whatever, they're saying they're not responsible for it unless you buy this insurance. So you can click it off, but I think you're crazy at that point. I mean, if your bike comes in and it's damaged, which a lot of them do, and you didn't get this insurance and they say, sorry, that's on you, then, I'm not comfortable with that. So I would definitely add in the insurance, which is going to push this bike into the $2,300 range, 23 and change. So just something to consider. So the next bike, I'm going to go to this bike here, and this one starts out at $2,400. The other thing I want to say about the Wyatt bike is their financing is not good at all. They need to get some financing. Like these two companies we're going to look at has a firm, but really that other company needs a hookup with one of those companies to offer financing. So not a lot of people can shell out $2,400 for a bike out of their pocket, or at least can justify doing it. All right, this other bike is a Mockwheel. So this is a very attractive bike, similar looking to the Wyatt bike, so I like it a lot. This one's got a little bit longer fenders on it. Very good looking bike, I think. Again, this one's got the air suspension on it. It's very similar. This thing bobs up and down like this. The crank on this thing is much smaller, but this one does have an 8-speed in the rear. No rack available for this at the present time. Supposedly they are coming out with one. So the technical, we'll get into this thing here. So the battery's 48 volts. So we went from 60 down to 48 volts. This is a 20 amp hour battery. I know it says 19.6, but everybody'd call it a 20 amp hour battery. 28 miles an hour, level 5. And I heard the problem with this bike, they do not, I guess it can be overridden, but they're not telling anybody how to do it, and no one's figured it out yet. So this bike is locked into a class 3 bike that'll only go 28 miles an hour supposedly. I do know people claim that they can get these bikes from 30 to 33 miles an hour depending on the weight of the actual rider. They're claiming their range from 60 to 80 miles. Again, this bike being an 1100 watt motor. The motor's 1100 watt. I don't know what the peak is. They're not saying. But the display is LED. So anyways, this bike is, like I said, it's locked into this class 3. You can't override it to make it faster than supposedly 28 miles an hour. But like I said, I did hear it does go up further. So it's an 8-speed, so you get a little bit more on that. The crankset is smaller. So this does have a torque sensor, so that's very good. I'd like to see a torque sensor on the other two bikes that I'm looking at, but it's not. The brakes, Techno. They're not saying what size the rotor is, but I would say it's 180. So they're really not telling you a lot here. Saying the standover bike height is 45 inches? No way. 4 feet? That doesn't even make sense, guys. So that's wrong. So we don't even know what this height is. The anything else? Free shipping, so you don't have to pay for shipping. This bike is not available in a step through hidden battery. So this battery here, I would call it an integrated, fully integrated, but I know a lot of companies still call it a semi-integrated battery because it could be accessed from the outside. But like I said, it's got the torque sensor, 1,000-watt motor. They're not telling us what peak is on the motor. Samsung battery, same as the wired, which is good. Torque sensor, great. 8 speed, still not telling us what gears they're putting on it. It is I know it's an air shock, yes. So it's adjustable, which is great. But still, I mean, they're kind of vague on what this thing has on it. But all right, so that's this bike. And like I said, you're at $2,400 for this bike. But they got, $100 a month. So you can buy this bike for 24 months, 2 years, 0% interest for $100 a month. So, the financing is right. If Wyatt would have the same financing, that would be much nicer than, paying cash for it, I guess, or, going through a company that's going to charge you interest. I believe on their site you can go through PayPal. But PayPal's probably going to get, depending on your credit, if you got good credit, I think it's around 8% interest right now. So they're not saying what the crank is on this bike, but I'm telling you, that's a small crank. I'd be guessing this thing's 40 something-ish, 44 something. I don't know. So we'll go to the, so again, this bike is $100 more than the wired bike. Between this bike and the wired, so what am I going to spend on this bike when I buy it? Seat's got to go, so I'm buying that. Fender on it, I'm not going to do anything with the fender, so I don't have to buy that. I got to buy a crank for sure. Handlebars, they're gone. So I got to buy handlebars for this thing. Got to have a rack. Some way or another, you got to get a rack. So they're saying they are going to be coming out with a rack now. I only know that because somebody said it online. That they had talked to the company, and it's a reliable source that I trust that they know what they're talking about. So I think there is a rack coming out. They're not going to give this rack away. The rack's going to be at least $100, especially where they're selling it as an accessory. It's probably going to be more like $150 or something. So you got to add that to the price. You're pushing this bike into the $2,600 range now. What I would say about this bike is probably exit out, buddy. I don't want this bike, and that's the way it is. So I'm going to move on to my next bike. So this is the Ariel Rider Kepler, and I personally, looking at these 3 bikes, I would, if all 3 bikes were in front of me and they said take one, I would take the wired bike. But considering that this bike is $1,700 shipped to you for free, they have $106 a month, so you're going to get 18 months financing on this bike. So a year and a half versus 2 years on the other one. And this is 0% financing also. So the financing is attractive. The price is very attractive for what you're getting. And we're going to go over this bike, and I'll show you why I think this bike is, again, put all 3 in front of me, I would take the wired bike. But put the price tags on it, and this is why I'm going to say I would go with this bike. All right, so let's start by looking at it. It's kind of not as attractive to me as the wired or the Mockwheel. Kind of, boxy up in here. Well, this is the step-through frame, which I would not get. Even though this bike has that bar, which is going to reinforce this frame, I kind of think it's too goofy looking, and it looks better with the bar on it. So this is probably the one I'd buy. I'd probably get it in a red too. Who knows? So this to me looks a little bit better than this bulbous looking bar here. You could even, you could put a water bottle here on this bike, but then why have a step through? This one here, at least you could put the water bottle underneath. And I don't know. I think it's probably a better looking bike. So I would go with this style. So again, this is a semi-integrated battery, but it kind of, it's kind of nice the way they slope it, kind of pulls it together a little bit. Um, Again, you could put your water bottle into here. Again, they're strapping this controller on the back of the bike. Whatever. I don't know where else you could put it, I guess. So you got to put it somewhere. The fender design is a little bit better to me, but it makes the bike look a little bit clunkier, I guess. So that's the one downfall about this bike, is not as attractive a bike to me as either one of the other two. So attractive wise, this bike is the least on my scale, but the price is on my scale. And it's got the rack, it's got the suspension on the front. No suspension on the rear of this bike though, so you're sacrificing that. So you would have to put a suspension post on this bike. Put a good suspension post on this thing, you're going to get a decent ride out of it. I would be very happy with this ride, so I could live without the rear suspension. Even though if I had a choice, if it came with rear suspension, I'd pay a little bit more money for it. The bike does come with the rear rack, so you're good there. It does have an integrated light also in this bike, which does have a stop light in it. 1,000-watt motor in this thing, and it's a Bafang motor. So that's a very good motor. I don't think the other ones said what they were. 52 volts in this one. So this is between the two bikes. 52 volts to me is at a good position. The 60 volt that's on the wired. Now you're getting into a battery that there's not a lot out there. To put a second battery on that bike, there are manufacturers that are building a 60 volt battery, but they're charging a little bit of a premium because it's not a battery that a lot of bikes have. It's a 20 amp hour battery. It's got LG cells, so it's another bike with a quality battery on it. None of these bikes said that they were UL approved too, just so you know. Colored LCDs on this thing. 1,000-watt motor. So they're saying 75 up to 75 miles plus. On this setup, I'd give it a good 35. I would bet I would get out of it. 20 amp hour battery with the 1,000-watt motor. They're saying 32 miles an hour top speed, and I have heard that these bikes they won't keep up with the wired, but they'll hold their own. 32 may be on the low side, let's put it that way, from what I've read online. So this does have the rear integrated brake light in it, so that's something that the other two didn't have. The charger at 2.5, a little on the weak side, but that's okay. Twist throttle on this one, 5 speeds a pass. Techno brakes, hydraulic, 180 rotors. 52 tooth crank on this one, so I'd probably be upgrading the crank to a 58. Step over height on this bike's 31, so 1 more inch higher than the wired bike. Plus, like I said, you'd be adding that suspension post on here, so that's going to your step over height. Are they showing us where it is? No. So step over height on this bike, they're probably judging it to here, but you're going to be getting off the seat and you're going to be here, so it's probably at least another 2 inches up. So for me to ride this bike, I might be standing on my tippy toes, but the weight is 73 pounds. Doesn't say with or without the battery. What would I have to change on this? The seat, probably the crank. Got to put the battery on the back. Suspension post on it. Got to change out the handlebars more than likely, because I would probably want to go with something more like the BMX bars. So I would have to spend, some money on the bike, a little bit. Not any more than the rest of them, I don't think. So again, attractive price, attractive financing, no rear suspension on the bike. But I don't know. Out of the 3 guys, I think this would probably be my winner. If I had to shell the money out of my pocket, put the 3 in front of me and tell me to pick one, I'm going to take the wired bike. So that's my 2 cents, guys, and thanks for watching today.